Imagine living beside one of the most famous women in the world, watching her smile for millions while privately carrying fears, pressures, and emotions that almost nobody could see. Now imagine keeping those memories to yourself for decades. Princess Diana's story has been told countless times. We have seen the photographs, heard the interviews, watched documentaries, and listened to people who knew her describe the woman behind the public image. But there is something especially powerful about hearing from someone whose job was not simply to know Diana, but to protect her. A bodyguard sees a different side of a person. They notice who enters the room. They notice who makes someone uncomfortable. They notice changes in routine, changes in mood, moments of silence, and situations that ordinary observers might completely miss. And that is what makes the story of Diana's final years so fascinating. Before we go any further, remember one important thing. Stories surrounding Diana's final years have often been surrounded by rumors, speculation, and conflicting accounts. So in this video, we are focusing on the human story and on publicly reported recollections rather than presenting unverified theories as fact. Princess Diana was born into privilege, but her life inside the royal family brought pressures that few ordinary people could understand. She became internationally famous at an extraordinary speed. Suddenly, every movement mattered. Every dress was photographed. Every expression was analyzed. Every relationship became public property. And yet, behind all of that attention was a woman who was still trying to understand herself. Diana became known around the world for her warmth. She could walk into a room filled with strangers and somehow make people feel that she was speaking directly to them. That quality became one of her greatest strengths, but it also meant that people constantly wanted something from her. The public wanted photographs. The media wanted stories. The royal institution expected dignity and discipline. Her family had expectations. Her friends had expectations. And Diana herself was searching for something that perhaps mattered more than all of those things, a sense of peace. By the time she reached her later years, Diana had transformed dramatically from the shy young woman the world had first seen in the early 1980s. She became more confident, more independent, more outspoken, and increasingly determined to control her own life. That transformation was not always comfortable for the people around her. Diana was no longer simply a princess performing a role. She was becoming Diana, and that distinction is extremely important. Her humanitarian work became one of the clearest examples of that evolution. She visited hospitals. She met people living with HIV and AIDS at a time when fear and misinformation were widespread. She spoke with people affected by poverty. She supported campaigns against landmines, and she used her fame to draw attention toward people who were often ignored. This was not just public relations. For many people who encountered her, those meetings felt deeply personal. She had a remarkable ability to connect with people who were suffering. But there was another side to her life: the constant attention, the cameras, the pursuit by photographers, the pressure of being recognized everywhere. Even ordinary moments could become international news. Imagine trying to have a private conversation while knowing that someone might be photographing you from a distance. Imagine going through an emotional period and seeing your private life discussed on the front pages. Imagine knowing that millions of people believe they understand your life, even though they have never met you. That was Diana's reality. And this is where the perspective of security personnel becomes particularly interesting. A bodyguard is close enough to see the person behind the headlines, but trained to remain in the background. They are there to protect. They are not supposed to become part of the story. So when someone who spent time protecting Diana later speaks about her life, audiences naturally pay attention. Not because every recollection is automatically perfect, but because such people witnessed moments that the cameras did not always capture. During Diana's final years, she was experiencing an extraordinary period of change. Her marriage to Charles had ended. Her official position had changed. She was building a new identity. She was spending more time outside the traditional royal environment. And she was becoming increasingly involved in causes that mattered to her. At the same time, her personal relationships were attracting enormous public attention. This combination created a difficult environment. Diana wanted freedom. The public wanted access. The press wanted photographs. And security professionals had to think about risks that ordinary people never had to consider. That tension became one of the defining features of her final years. There is something important to understand here. When we look back at Diana today, it is easy to see the ending and then interpret everything that happened before it through that final event. But Diana did not know how her story would end. She was living day by day. She was making plans. She was raising her sons. She was traveling. She was meeting people. She was laughing. She was dealing with ordinary problems. And she was trying to build a future. That human perspective can sometimes disappear when we turn a real person's life into a historical mystery. Her sons, William and Harry, were perhaps the most important part of her world. Whatever happened in her personal life, motherhood remained central to Diana's identity. She wanted her sons to experience more of the world than royal tradition might normally allow. She wanted them to understand that not everyone lived inside palaces. She took them to places and introduced them to people whose lives were very different from their own. In doing so, she tried to teach them empathy, and perhaps that is one of the most lasting parts of her legacy. She wanted them to see people as people, not as titles, not as statistics, not as social classes. People. As Diana's public life changed, so did the way the media treated her. She could generate enormous attention simply by appearing somewhere. A photograph of Diana could sell newspapers. A rumor about Diana could dominate television programs. A new relationship could become front-page news. This created an almost impossible cycle. The more famous she became, the more photographers wanted her. The more photographers followed her, the more difficult privacy became. The more she tried to escape the attention, the more valuable the images became. And that cycle was not limited to Diana. It was part of a larger transformation in celebrity culture. The 1990s were becoming an era in which private lives were increasingly treated as entertainment. And Diana was one of the biggest targets of that culture. Some people around her worried about the constant attention. Security personnel had to consider routes, vehicles, entrances, exits, crowds, and unpredictable situations. But no security plan can completely control the world. Sometimes danger comes from a place nobody expects. Sometimes the greatest risk is not a single individual. Sometimes it is a combination of speed, pressure, confusion, and circumstances unfolding within seconds. That is why the final night of Diana's life remains such a painful subject. On August 31, 1997, Diana was in Paris. She had been spending time with Dodi Fayed. Later that night, they left the Ritz Paris. The vehicle carrying them entered the Pont d'Alma tunnel. What happened next changed history forever. The crash killed Diana, Dodi Fayed, and driver Henry Paul. Bodyguard Trevor Rees Jones survived. Diana was only 36 years old. The world was stunned, and what followed was an extraordinary wave of grief. people who had never met Diana cried in the streets. Flowers appeared outside royal residences. Millions watched the funeral. The woman who had spent years surrounded by cameras suddenly became absent from every camera. And perhaps that is why the public reaction was so intense. People felt that they had lost someone they knew, but they did not truly know every part of her life. They knew the public Diana, the woman who shook hands, the woman who hugged patients, the woman who walked through crowds, the woman who smiled, the woman who seemed vulnerable and strong at the same time. Her death forced the world to confront the cost of celebrity culture. It also raised questions about security, media behavior, responsibility, and the boundaries of privacy. Investigations into the crash examined numerous factors, including the condition of the driver, the speed of the vehicle, and the pursuit by photographers. The official findings did not support many of the more extreme theories that later circulated. But conspiracy theories continue. And this is where we should be careful. A mysterious story can be fascinating. A dramatic theory can attract millions of views. But Diana's real story is already powerful without inventing facts. Her life does not need a conspiracy to be interesting. It was extraordinary on its own. She was a young woman who entered one of the most famous families in the world. She became one of the most recognizable people on earth. She experienced an intensely public marriage. She went through personal struggles under constant observation. She reinvented herself. She became a major humanitarian figure, and she died far too young. The people who protected her saw only pieces of that story. But those pieces can still tell us something. They remind us that behind the headlines was a human being. A woman who could be confident one day and uncertain the next. A woman who could appear perfectly composed in public while dealing with private emotions. A mother, a friend, a celebrity, a humanitarian, and ultimately a person trying to live her life under circumstances that would overwhelm almost anyone. When people say that a former bodyguard has finally broken his silence, it is important to understand what that phrase means. Sometimes it refers to a new interview. Sometimes it refers to old comments being rediscovered. Sometimes it is simply a dramatic headline designed to attract attention. So whenever you hear such a claim, ask yourself, what exactly was said? When was it said? Is there a reliable source? Does the claim match established evidence? That doesn't make the story less interesting. It makes the story more responsible. And perhaps the greatest lesson from Diana's final years is that fame does not eliminate vulnerability. In fact, sometimes fame can make vulnerability harder to hide and harder to protect. Diana had access to extraordinary wealth and privilege, but she also lived under extraordinary pressure. She could travel anywhere, but privacy was difficult. She could meet almost anyone. But knowing whom to trust was another matter. She could influence millions, but she could not control every headline written about her. That contrast is what makes her story so compelling even decades later. Diana's legacy also demonstrates the power of empathy. She changed the way many people viewed the British royal family. She helped bring attention to humanitarian issues. She made compassion part of her public identity, and perhaps that is why her memory has survived. Not because she was perfect, she wasn't. Not because her life was simple. It wasn't, but because people saw something recognizable in her. They saw someone who struggled, someone who searched for happiness, someone who wanted to be loved, someone who wanted to make a difference, and someone who sometimes seemed trapped between the person the world expected her to be and the person she wanted to become. That is a story that remains relevant. Today, social media has made the boundary between public and private life even thinner. Celebrities can be photographed almost anywhere. Personal relationships can become viral stories within minutes. Rumors can travel across the world before facts have even been confirmed. Diana lived before smartphones and social media. Yet many of the pressures she experienced feel strangely familiar today. Her story can therefore teach us something about the world we live in now. We should be careful about turning real human suffering into entertainment. We should question sensational claims. And we should remember that every photograph represents a moment in someone's life that may be far more complicated than the image suggests. When we look at Diana's final years, perhaps the most meaningful question is not, what secret did she take with her? Maybe the better question is, what did she leave behind? She left behind 2 sons who became major public figures themselves. She left behind humanitarian work. She left behind countless memories for people who met her. And she left behind a lesson about compassion that continues to influence people around the world. Her bodyguards were there to protect her physically. But history remembers another kind of protection too, the protection of her legacy, the responsibility to tell her story honestly, not as a perfect fairy tale, not as a conspiracy thriller, but as the complicated life of a real woman, a woman who was born Diana Spencer and became Princess Diana, a woman who entered the global spotlight and never truly escaped it, a woman whose final years were filled with change, controversy, hope, pressure, and uncertainty, and a woman whose life ended suddenly, leaving millions asking how someone so famous could also be so vulnerable. Decades later, people still talk about Diana. That alone tells us something. Some public figures disappear from memory when the cameras stop. Diana did not. Her photographs remain. Her humanitarian work remains. Her sons continue her story. And the questions surrounding her final years continue to attract attention. But perhaps the most respectful way to remember her is not by endlessly searching for another shocking secret. It is by remembering the person behind the princess, the woman who tried to use her position to help others, the mother who loved her children, the public figure who changed the conversation around compassion, and the human being who, like all of us, had hopes, fears, mistakes, strengths, and weaknesses. If you have watched this far, then you probably understand why Diana's story continues to fascinate generations. It isn't simply about royalty. It isn't simply about fame. And it isn't simply about tragedy. It is about what happens when a human being becomes larger than life in the eyes of the world, while still remaining deeply human inside. And maybe that is the part of Diana's story we should never forget. Before you leave, tell me in the comments, what do you think was the most important part of Princess Diana's legacy, her humanitarian work, her role as a mother, or the way she changed the public image of the royal family? I would genuinely love to know your opinion, and if you enjoyed this story, don't leave just yet. Like this video if you want us to continue exploring the untold human stories behind famous historical figures. Share it with someone who has always been fascinated by Princess Diana. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because there are many more stories waiting to be uncovered. Thank you for watching, and remember, behind every famous photograph is a real human story.